All right, everybody settle in. Thank you for joining us for this talk about vulnerability management and some of the challenges that it faces. I'd like to welcome Ben of KC.
Thank you a lot. How's it going today? Everybody good? Saturday, it's pretty awesome. I will kind of roll through this fairly fast just because I originally set this up as like a 30-minute talk. But if you have questions or whatever, absolutely, or you just want to argue, whatever, that's fine too. Feel free to yell something out, or we'll have some time at the end. Just, warning, there may be a little bit of profanity. It's hard to talk about vulnerability management and not use profanity. So yeah, let's dig into this. And by the chuckles, at least some of you have some experience with that. All right, so my name is Ben Webb. If you're looking for me online, I'm on LinkedIn, but I'm almost never there. The best place to find me is Mastodon. Ben from KC and on infosec.exchange. But let's dig in. So what is this about? And the first thing everybody asks me about this talk is, what is Dr. CVE Love? It's a reference to a movie from back in the 60s. It's a happy, fun little comedy about nuclear war and the end of the world. Which fits well for vulnerability management because a lot of times this feels like a war that you absolutely cannot win. And it is full of people that are making well-meaning but absolutely terrible decisions. Things that seem logical and are just the absolute worst of what you can be doing. So why me? I have spent most of my career kind of bouncing back and forth between infrastructure and security. And at almost every point, I have been involved in a vulnerability management scheme in some way or another, either as the person inflicting it on someone or as the person having it inflicted on them. So I have a lot of it I've seen from all the sides. The obligatory introductory slide. So I've been in security for about 28-ish years. I've got certs and things like that, so clearly I can take tests. Currently, I'm the manager of engineering and technology at Recon InfoSec, where we do managed security operations. We do not do vulnerability management, so I'm not hawking anything here. I'm just talking about something I care about. I grew up in Kansas City until about a year and a half ago. I reached escape velocity, and I'm now based out of Albuquerque. You can find me, like I said, on Mastodon or various Discords. Just look for Ben from KC. I think I'm the only one who uses that. So, all right. So what are we actually talking about? There's three things that we're going to break this into. First thing is the precepts. These are just the things you absolutely have to understand before vulnerability management can make possible sense. Then I'm going to take you through a process that is mostly straightforward to get actual value out of vulnerability management, because it is possible. It's just not possible the way most companies do it. And then we're going to talk about the point, and that's really just what is the value you can get. I might even share things that management likes, like KPIs. But spoiler, the point is really to find the most important thing you can do right now to work on your environment, because this never does stop. So let's start with the precepts. The very first thing in vulnerability management you absolutely have to understand is the data is terrible. There's tons of it, and it is complete crap. Why do I say that? Well, mostly because vulnerability managers, the way they work, vulnerability scanners, are awful. And they don't mean to be awful. This is one of those well-meaning but bad decisions. But essentially what they do is they sit down and they look at a system, and they, by hook or by crook, however they do it, try to assess, inventory everything that's on that system, every version of every piece of software. And then they go to the great vulnerability database in the sky, and they go through the list, and they say, okay, well, that version has all of these vulnerabilities, so therefore they must all apply. Here they are. Doesn't pay attention to how it's configured, doesn't pay attention to what you're actually running on that system, or software is running, or a lot of times it can be in a backup directory, still shows up. Because your vulnerability vendors, this is true of, like Tenable or Rapid7 or all the folks will say, well, put our agent on there and that'll make it better. No, it makes it worse, because then it scans the entire drive and lists like the backup from 15 years ago that nobody's afraid to delete. is still there. So clearly the server is vulnerable to log4j because software that you had sitting in a backup directory in somebody's home directory is there. It's junk. It's all junk. Well, mostly junk. We're going to figure out how to get through the junk here later. But that data is terrible. So you can never, it's always with grain of salt, with tongue firmly in cheek. You cannot just assume it's gospel. Senior management thinks it's gospel, and they absolutely love it because they have numbers and they can track things and trend them, but it's all crap. Also crap is prioritization. I've heard people who I respect and feel like are intelligent say, well, what you do is you sit down and prioritize these and you go through them and then it's fine. And you just make sure you work the highest priority, the most critical ones first, and everything's good. And that does not work. It doesn't work for lots of reasons, but I can sort of just spell it out. So let's say you're going to do that. You're going to take, well, I'm going to take my vulnerability list and I'm going to figure out what are the most critical and we're going to take those. So you take your giant list of CVEs, and if you have an environment of any size, that list is probably in the hundreds of thousands. You take the most critical ones and you go and you find the person who owns that. And you say, all right, person, here's a list of CVEs that we need to fix. What is the first thing they say? What's a CVE? We assume a much higher level of knowledge about this type of stuff than people actually have. So by the time you've finished explaining what a CVE is and what you're asking that person to do, what's happened is Google has dropped another 0 day. You have 50,000 new Chrome CVEs that you need to go fix, and your prioritization list is completely screwed. It's not a good use of time, and it doesn't work to just sit there and say, we're going to prioritize this and it's going to be fine. Besides that, the CVEs are pointless. It's genuinely a waste of anybody on the defense's time to sit down and talk about CVEs. It is a worthless activity. In fact, the person who was just before me was just talking, I caught the second half of his presentation about how hard it was to get Microsoft to issue a CVE, because the only people that can issue Microsoft CVEs are Microsoft, and they didn't want to. CVEs are crap. The other problem is a lot of CVEs, because red teamers love to have them, they're great on a red team resume, totally agree, but a lot of them read something like, well, on this server, if you have the Slovenian language pack and it's set for Chicago, US time zone, every second Thursday after 4 p.m., it will emit 6 extra bytes that tell you what version it's running. Nobody cares. Most of them are complete junk, are never going to be exploited, and are just drivel that nobody needs to talk about. So don't, because talking about CVEs doesn't help the situation anyway. Fourth point, there is absolutely no winning this game. You are never going to win at vulnerability management. You're not going to dust your hands off and say, all right, well, we've solved vulnerabilities. What's next? That's not how this works. This is a process. It's not a project. This is a job description, not something that somebody is going to do for a little while. Once you get into this, it is just life. And you are going to just keep doing it and doing it and doing it and survive the day. So yes, you're going to stop at the end of the day and you say, well, I'm done for now, and I'm going to come back tomorrow and we're going to do this again, because it doesn't end. So if your company, your employer, your management is approaching this like, well, boy, we're going to clean up these vulnerabilities, that is not how this works. And it absolutely can't be, because the bad guys get a vote, right? They're going to keep doing things. The world's going to keep shifting under your feet, and the vulnerabilities are going to keep showing up. Fifth thing, this is not a metric of your success or your team's success. Whatever these results tell you, this is not because somebody sucks at their job. It's because the world sucks, because software is a pain, because doing this stuff is hard. If it was easy, we'd have a bunch of teenagers in here doing it as interns and nobody would have jobs. So don't look at yourself or your team or your people and beat yourselves up over, well, I don't think we're doing a good job because of these vulnerability numbers. This is not your fault. This is just a thing that you're dealing with. Next one, and this is super common mistake. I've worked at 3 companies where they were doing this. Vulnerability management should not drive your operational discipline. The hell does that mean? If you don't have a patching program already, if you're not regularly patching systems, vulnerability management cannot help you. All it can do is tell you that you should be patching your systems. if you don't have configuration management, if you're not setting secure baselines for your operating systems, vulnerability management is just going to tell you that you need to set secure baselines for your operating systems. Go do that stuff and then come back to vulnerability management. Because right now, all you're going to do is look at a very long list of millions of entries and be scared. So work on the things that are actually making your company better and making your IT systems better, and save vulnerability management to monitor that stuff later on. And then the last thing, 80% of the vulnerability data you have, even the stuff that isn't false positives and weird crap that scanners throw out, can be safely ignored. That is a real number, and I'll explain where that number comes from. But 80% of it, nobody needs to talk about ever, because it does not matter. So let's talk about what the process looks like. First thing you do is you gather data. Every technology in your company with its associated patching process. If it doesn't have a patching process, that's something we write down on under one of those KPIs later. But all the things that you know what they are and all the things you have a process for, just get those in a list and how often you patch them. If it's monthly, great. If it's quarterly, okay. If it's yearly, you should probably think about that, but it's your process, not mine. So you've got that, and you've got a list of every vulnerability, like everything your scanner throws out, put it in the list. Makes everybody happy. No one can accuse you of trying to hide anything. So now rescore this data, because as we said, most of it is crap. Most of it is CVEs that nobody cares about. So score with something more realistic, and this is not CVSS. CVSS is not meant to score risk anyway, and it's not a great measure. And it's assigned by the same people assigning the CVEs, meaning, hey, the companies themselves. So it's generally not accurate anyhow. This is one of the few times, and I'm not selling anything that I sell here because I don't have one, but where I actually do recommend some kind of paid service. Lots of your threat intel companies will tell you that they have some sort of CVE scoring thing. It's probably great. Pick a horse and ride it. It honestly doesn't matter which one. You're just filtering down a bunch of the stuff that nobody cares about. It makes it easier to talk about this later. Then you take it and you rescore it again. Do this, I like to do it by subnet. Why by subnet? Because in Adobe, like let's say an Acrobat vulnerability sitting on Stan's computer that he uses all day long to check email and browse the web is a very different thing than that same Adobe vulnerability sitting on a server that 6 people have access to behind a firewall that can't get out to the internet. They're not the same vulnerability. It's 2 entirely different contexts. Don't act like they're the same thing, because those things have different sensitivities. Stan's desktop you can patch, you know, like Wednesday after patch Tuesday. It doesn't matter, because if Stan can't do his job, he doesn't doing that great of a job anyway. No offense meant if your name's Stan. But that other server is maybe supporting a storage array or something, and maybe is a lot harder to patch. So that may sit there a while just because of process and risk and things like that, and all that's also fine. So make sure that you have like awareness and context for all of those things. Now, smush this data together. That is the technical term. Basically what you want to know is when was it first detected, and when, this is why you wanted your patching process, in your normal operations, would you patch that? So if it's a Windows or a Chrome vulnerability and you're patching monthly on your desktops, that's how, you know, that's got about a 30-day lifespan. Have that data there too. What tool you use this for, whatever you're happy with. You can do this with Perl and a database. You can do this with Power BI. You can do this, whatever tool you're used to. Excel will work if it's not too much data. Whatever makes you happy, go for that. Because now you're going to filter it down to figure out what you actually have. And the first thing, and here's your 80% of junk, is all the stuff that you're getting ready to patch, don't list it. It's not helping you to list it. It's not helping you to track, oh, we patched every month. So of our 1,000 systems, we had 50,000 vulnerabilities show up, and then they all went away. And then the next month, 50,000 new vulnerabilities showed up, and they all went away. Yeah, you patched. Not difficult. It's not helpful to look at that data because it is stuff that is just coming and going and doesn't matter. Also, get rid of the crap you're not going to fix. Vulnerability scanners love to throw out errors about invalid certificates and old TLS versions and all sorts of things that if you're not like using it to track a project to go resolve that, toss that data. You're not going to fix it. If you're fixing it and you're using this as a way to monitor your process, great. Most of the time you're not. Most of the time it's just nobody's bothered to go and whitelist that in a scanner. Just toss it. It doesn't matter. You're not going to fix it anyhow, and it's probably presents no risk. And once you get through all of that, you can get down to the point, which is what's the most important thing you can do right now to make your environment better? You're not going to fix all the vulnerabilities. You're not going to solve vulnerability management, but you can get down to things you can really fix. So take all that data that you've now smushed and filtered. What are your most vulnerable systems? What are the systems that are sitting on your network right now that for whatever reason, it's not that they haven't been patched in a month, they haven't been patched in 6 months. Are they not getting maintained? Are they not in a list in SCCM? Did Intune not get installed? Is it the CEO's laptop and they keep just sitting deferring the patching? All of those things happen. Fix those. Those systems present real risk. You'll never find them while you're watching your patch numbers go up and down every month, but you will find them once you filter that stuff out and look for that stuff, because that is things that actually do need fixed. Is there an environment? Found this one time that sat there for months, some POC servers that were built that nobody ever used after testing out their thing and then just left running. We're never put in SCCM, we're never put in the CMDB or anything, and they're just sitting there with 10,000 vulnerabilities apiece. Go find that stuff and fix it, because that's important. Watching your numbers go up and down every month because you patched or didn't is not helpful. And then look for the things that are prevalent across the environment, stuff that's affecting a lot of systems. If you've got one CVE and it's affecting 50% of your Windows systems, something's up. There might be follow-on activity. You might need to go do a reg key or something like that. You might have GPO that didn't get pushed down correctly. Figure that stuff out. Again, you're looking for these things that you can make a real difference within your environment without having to watch a bunch of junk go up and down that wasn't helping you anyway. So let's talk about some KPIs, because no management, no senior manager is going to be happy if you can't come back to them and report some sort of success, right? Or if you can't come back and report where they're at. They need metrics, they need trends, they need things that they can talk to their colleagues about so they can sound smart. So there are some measurable metrics you can get out of here. If you take all of your vulnerabilities that actually apply, meaning we're getting rid of all the stuff that's getting ready to get patched anyhow and the stuff that we're not fixing, you can develop some overall trends. But think trend, not specific numbers, because these are directional, not exact. I like to work in moving averages. Is my 3-month moving average better or worse than my 6-month moving average? Because that shows like trend over time and it's not a specific thing. And if something goes all wonky with it, now you've got something worth looking at. Did we miss patching something? Did we, is there a new vulnerability that's come out that maybe we actually need to have some different thought around that maybe just isn't a patch this time? And then look at the things that aren't getting remediated within their SLA. Again, this is the stuff that you've already filtered out to find. Why isn't it? Working through those things, and that can give you some numbers again that you can report. And those are things that are actually worth trying to solve and to go find. And then if you're mature enough to have a vulnerability management process, you probably have exceptions to it. You probably have things with bad vendors who say, well, we can only support this on Windows 2008, Service Pack 2, Release 3, and we won't go any further than that because we haven't certified it. Well, that happens, and those are things that hopefully you write down as an exception and you store somewhere. How many of those do you have? And if those weren't exceptions, just how ugly would that look in relevance to your other numbers? That's an important thing to report. Then, and again, back to the operational discipline, how many things don't fall in this process? How many things do you have as you were sitting there getting your list of stuff with its patching process where there was no patching process to be found? That's a problem. Those are things you can fix, and you can write that down as a number and say, one of our KPIs is how well we're doing with patching programs, and we suck right here, we have to fix. That's how you get management behind things like, oh, we should patch routers. Oh, we should patch cameras, or we should patch power distribution units. All things that people tend to bring into an org and then ignore. And then same question for configuration management. Do you have a tool? Are you putting a secure baseline on all your Cisco gear? If you don't, maybe here's an opportunity to actually justify having one. And because vulnerability scanners typically, if they're configured right, will scan the whole network, how much stuff do you have in there that you can't even identify? Just IP addresses that answer, nobody's sure what they are. If you haven't, having done this, that number is not zero. If you can get down to 15% of it, I think you're actually doing really good. But that is something worth figuring out, is like how much of this is just stuff that we can't find. So, conclusions. Vulnerability management can be a real pain in the ass, but it can provide a lot of value. At any given point, the value you can look for is, what can I do right now? Do I go fix the CEO's laptop? Do I get that extra registry entry that's required to make the, there was one for Edge not too long ago. IE had a bunch of these where you had to actually put a registry entry to make it apply. Does that need to get done? Go find those things that will have an outsize. Can I finally expunge this test environment that nobody's using anymore? Find those things. That's a thing you can sit down. You know what? We knocked that out, and it was a lot of risk. It was a lot of vulnerability, and we feel better for having done it. And the last thing is, and I almost made this the first thing, it's always in my mind, what order do you do this stuff in? Don't beat yourself up over it. The bad guy gets a vote here. They're going to always be trying to break all the things. So don't let it make you feel like you're not doing your work just because they're doing theirs. It's all going to be all right. We're all going to stay on the same side and keep working at it. You're doing good. Your team's doing good. So don't let this reflect poorly on them. All right. So are there questions? Nobody yelled at me in the middle of the thing, but does anybody want to yell at me now? All right. Well, thank you very much. Big thanks to all of you for being here. These cons don't happen if nobody shows up. So thank you for coming. They're fun. They're informative. Big thanks to CactusCon and all these wonderful people running around in orange, because they all volunteer to make this happen, and it's awesome when it does. And a thank you, I'll plug them once, my employer, Recon InfoSec, for letting me do this kind of thing. If you like doing defensive security type stuff or enjoying these sorts of discussions, hit us up for Thursday Defensive. It's a half-hour Zoom call that we have every Thursday. Hop on, chat with us. It's just a bunch of people sitting around talking about cool InfoSec stuff. And then I always have to give a shout out to SecKC. The one thing I miss from moving away from Kansas City was SecKC. They have a wonderful security scene there. They're awesome folks. They have a cool Discord. You should definitely hang out with them. Thank you very much.